there, this is Cassia.
And this is Coden.
And welcome to The Ebon Hawk, a podcast where we discuss the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic games and proposed movie adaptation, as well as Star Wars news. Today we'll be talking about KOTOR and the plot differences with Jedi Fallen Order. We'll then discuss last week's episode of The Mandalorian. This is episode 7, and this is where the Disney begins.
So last week we covered the tutorial of both the video games, how they kind of get your feet wet on both the dice roll mechanics of Knights of the Republic and the more just throw you out in the deep water of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And so today we wanted to talk maybe just a couple different plot points with the main character, the supporting cast, and the villains of the plot. So, Cassia, talk to us about Revan.
Well, Revan, you could kind of choose when you're playing who Revan could be. Could either be serious, you could either be dark side, you could be light, or you could be kind of a jovial kind of like jokester. I think the canonical Revan ended up being the guy with the longer hair, brown, and the light side Revan, of course. But if someone were to ask me to describe Revan, I would say it's someone who is kind of conflicted, light versus dark, kind of can joke around, but has a lot to think about underneath the surface about war, light, and darkness. That's how I would describe Revan.
Yeah, you meet him when he doesn't know his past and he's just kind of going with the cards that are dealt in front of him. And as the game progresses, he learns more about himself as well as you learn a little bit more about him. And you're faced with decisions that are influenced by, I guess, how you take the different plot elements. Revan's a pretty deep character where, though he had a lot going on in his past, a lot of his present experiences really shape who he becomes in the future.
Yeah. He has the unique opportunity to choose which path to go down, because he's tread on the light side and the dark side, but he's given the opportunity to be like, this is what I want, and make the choice for himself. He's kind of rediscovering who he is throughout the plot of KOTOR.
I think what's similar with Cal Kestis is that he had a past that he had to walk away from to survive. So where his is more of a choice, where Revan's was more of like a happenstance, they were similar in the fact that they had to like move on and forward. The one thing that I think that Jedi Fallen Order lacks that KOTOR didn't was because you can choose how you saw Revan, you become more attached to who he is, who he's around. Where Cal, like I didn't really like Cal when I first saw him in the promotional trailers, and I still don't like Cal. I think he's just kind of a weak character. But the main thing is that there's a lot more to build with Revan between player and character than there is with player and Cal.
I think with Cal, he's not doing what he does out of cowardice to stay under the radar. He's really just trying to stay alive, and he saw his master like someone who like taught him everything, like his life depended upon the Jedi Order and his master, and he saw them like die out within a day. And I think that would be traumatizing for anyone. And so he kind of just had to be unremarkable, like be someone people would easily forget and not think about, you know? Because a lot of people like say Cal has the personality of like a wet towel, but I find him to be a good character, and I think he's like kind of a more subtle character. So I don't dislike Cal. I thought he was portrayed well by Cameron Monaghan. Fun fact about Cameron is he was the Joker on Gotham, or at least the Joker-esque character. And I think he did an excellent job, and a lot of people thought he did better than Jared Leto. Jared Leto's interpretation of the Joker. They preferred Cameron's.
I think
But
Jared Leto sits at the bottom of the food chain on that list.
yeah, no one wants to be Jared Leto. A lot of people were kind of mad that they couldn't choose the story of Jedi Fallen Order. But I kind of like having a set story rather than have everything determined by player choice. I did like Knights of the Old Republic, but I do like having like a set canonical story just so like it exists. It kind of reminds me like the happy medium, I think, is like the Force Unleashed, where there's definitely a main story. You could choose the ending, but like you always knew the canonical ending was the light side. But with the Force Unleashed, they would always have like DLCs like saying this is what could have happened.
I did think that it was a refresher to have a pretty set story. These games that release nowadays, they're very open. They're left with all kinds of different objectives. What was refreshing with Jedi Fallen Order was that it was very simple and straightforward. There was a lot of room that you can roam and explore, but there was a definite set path forward that you could always reference to and just move on with the story and make a pretty quick experience if you wanted it to be quick, which I really liked.
Yeah, I mean, you can go in depth as much as you want. Like, you don't have to put in like 30 plus hours to get the main story. You could beat the game in like, what do you say, 5 hours, 7 hours?
Of Jedi Fallen Order, I'd say has a completion time of about 10 to 15 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and that is just pushing straight objectives. So it is a little bit longer than a lot of the traditional campaigns nowadays that are very linear, like Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to go around and like collect all the lightsaber hilt components and the crystals and everything, then all the different outfits, whatever, you could extend that gameplay a little bit. But the thing with Fallen Order is that everything is very cosmetic and isn't influential to how you play the game. And so if you just push straight storyline, you'll progress Cal to basically exactly where he needs to be, regardless of how much time you kind of spent running around throughout the time getting there.
Yeah. So it's a good type of game. And I think it's just refreshing to have like a good solid story to play through. Like some games like they focus so much like on character choice that the main character won't really have much of a personality because it's all determined by character choice. Like sometimes if you can choose between like a male or female character, the characters, like even if you choose male or female, like it's basically the same game. I don't think like that's how it would work.
We saw that a lot with games like Fallout 4 and Mass Effect Andromeda, where, yeah, there was very little personality because of the extent that they wanted you to have to make choices in that game.
I like that there's a character and there's like a set story.
So, what about the supporting roles? What about your companions in KOTOR?
Knights of the Old Republic, they did a good job of giving everyone a personality. Mission is like kind of like, the teenager of the group. Zalbar is kind of just, the Wookiee. Canderous is like, kind of like, I'm the Mandalorian tough guy doing strong guy things. And then Karth is kind of like, I think they tried to make him like a little bit of a Han Solo, but like with a whole lot more post traumatic stress disorder and trust issues. I think he's kind of like what Poe Dameron could have been in the sequel trilogy, honestly. And then Bastila is interesting. She's such like a sheltered Jedi and kind of like I think you would say like defrosting ice queen. and like she's trying to be such a good Jedi because of like how she's kind of been sheltered and like going through a war and like kind of having to keep secrets about Revan is like she's the most susceptible to falling to the dark side. That everyone should have seen that coming, I think. And then Jolie is kind of like, I mean, in Star Wars nowadays, they say there's like no such thing as gray Jedi, but he's like an open minded Jedi, you know? And then Juhani is like kind of like another kind of like supporting Jedi character. Then HK-47 is like your protocol droid, but he's a sociopath, you know, and kills people for a living. Then T3M4 is kind of just like, you know, a little R2D2 in Knights of the Old Republic, but in Knights of the Old Republic 2 kind of has more to do. And I think that's everyone.
Yeah, one thing that I liked about the companions of KOTOR, and this is something that BioWare does really well with both their Mass Effect and their KOTOR series, is each individual party member or cast member in your party has a very specific role that they play. And depending on what you prefer or what you need, you can set up your party with these different individuals and they kind of change the dynamic of the story that's around them. So you don't see this in KOTOR very much because a lot of the dialogue is text based, but in Mass Effect, for example, your NPC companions will have these conversations with each other that are very unique to who you have with you. So if you had Drax and Cora in your team, they hated each other, so they'd always kind of be bickering, but you'd have maybe two other types of characters that were very good friends, and so they'd always just be crack and joke and having a good time while they're with you. And so that's just something that it kind of adds to the atmosphere of the story that's really unique to KOTOR compared to the Jedi Fallen Order. Jedi Fallen Order, you've got like your three companions. You have the Jedi, and I forget all these guys' names because I just don't remember them. But you've got the Jedi that picks you up and her captain
Sarah.
pilot. Yeah, Sarah.
And then Greaser, I believe.
Yeah, and
Or Grease, sorry.
okay. And all you really know about them is that they're picking you up because they need your help.
Yeah.
What's almost amusing, this is something I picked up when I was last playing the game and kind of thinking about KOTOR, our conversation leading up today, was that they don't really help you at all in the story. Now there's some cutscenes towards the end of the game where they come in and they help, but when you got your lightsaber drawn, you're trying to beat enemies, it's just you. They drop you off on the planet, you go do your task for Sarah, you come to report to Sarah, and then you travel to the next planet following up the next lead. And so and just a little bit about that, like the kind of the whole point of your task is you're trying to help Sarah find a holocron that helps locate force sensitive children, or it's not help locate, but it's a record containing where force sensitive children are. And so she basically sends you out to these different places to find them, and she just kind of hangs out back at her ship, wherein it's a very contrasted difference between Knights of the Republic, where you'd
have a party.
Yeah, and you're the party lead, and you kind of take who you want with you, and they're very involved in helping you complete your task.
I think like part of like Sarah and Grease steering on the ship is kind of like because it's kind of like how the game plays, you know, is like you're supposed to be alone, and like sometimes it's like hard to like program the AI to have like another character help you on your quest. So I can understand that, but sometimes it's like if it were to be a movie, you know, they would do it differently, but because it's a game, they have to like have it play one way.
Yeah, it's coming from Respawn Entertainment. They're actually pretty good with their AI, and so it was a little bit disappointing, just in my perspective, that they didn't go the extra mile to give you a kind of a squad to work with. But I mean, from the story narrative, it almost makes sense, other than it would have been nice that if she's going to task you to go and complete objectives, that she'd be there
Yeah,
with you.
in a perfect world. So
Right?
I did end up thinking her story was very interesting because when I kind of heard like description before it came out, I'm like, I kind of wondered if she had turned to the dark side, if that was going to be the reveal. But the reveal that it was her apprentice, her Padawan, that was the second sister. It was a very cool reveal because it made Sarah feel like she failed, you know? It just like they went through a horrible situation and perhaps Sarah could have handled it better. And she kind of left the second sister once she just turned, and you could just sense that her regret.
Yeah. Do I need to spoil something for you?
Spoil away. I mean, I've seen like most of the story, so
Okay. Sarah does. She does kind of succumb to the dark side around the time where her apprentice is captured. She uses the dark side to try and rescue her, which makes her even more frustrated with her and become a second sister.
Trilla was a very interesting character.
I think Trilla was probably my favorite part about Jedi Fallen Order, and that's going to move on to our following kind of bullet point for the kind of the comparison is our villains. I really liked learning about Trilla as the story went on, and understanding kind of her motivations, and then kind of seeing her trapped in her task.
That's one thing Jedi Fallen Order did. We kind of learned a bit about the Inquisitors from Star Wars Rebels, but we learned more like that every Inquisitor used to be a Jedi and that they were really tortured and everything to get to that point. Like they're more broken, I would say, than evil.
Yeah,
And
it's like they're like afraid to not be evil, and so they're evil off of like a reflex and not just because they are.
yeah, it's mostly like for survival, I think. Because like the alternative is just to die. So it's really a horrible like choice that was thrust upon them, like just because they survived, you know. And like how they survive is by either turning or killing like people they used to serve with, you know. So Trilla kind of reminded me of like Ben Solo and Kylo Ren, like especially like the helmet in the back. It just looks like Kylo's helmet, I would say.
That's actually a really interesting connection where they are kind of the same. They're kind of like a, I want to say like offspring reject, where like their superior had like betrayed them somehow,
Yeah.
and so they've kind of gone from being good or somewhat good, innocent, to being like the antagonist of the plot.
Yeah, they were in the position where they needed to be protected, and then the person they trusted like turned on them or kind of left them
Yeah, let him
to
down.
suffer. I think it was done a whole lot better in Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean I was far more convinced of Trilla's position than I was of Kylo Ren's position.
Yeah, I feel so sad that Trilla ended up dying at the end of Jedi Fallen Order, unless they reveal like, oh, she was just injured, you know? Because like it's kind of like shown off screen.
Oh, she's super
Like
dead.
because I know she's like super dead, but like you know they never say never. You know, like in like old Star Wars legends, you know, like the Force Unleashed, they worded it super vaguely when Vader and the Emperor were looking down on Starkiller's like body. They just kind of worded it very vaguely just to make sure they could always bring him back, you know? And then they ended up having a sequel even though like he died. I just wonder if like they could be like, and Trilla is injured, but she's fine, you know? Like I would be like, yeah, I buy it. It's totally fine. Like she didn't die, you know? It just
I
was a
get
really bad boo boo, you know? She's fine.
I guess it makes sense because they somehow found Luke's lightsaber in the middle of Bespin, which is, if you've ever gotten close to a gas giant, you know that that would never ever be retrievable ever again.
I guess the Force just wanted it to happen,
Yeah,
you know?
it's a good question
Or
for another time.
merchandising. So,
What
but
about
yeah.
Malak from Kotor?
I mean, I think he's a good villain. Is he the best? No. He's just kind of like one of those ruthless kind of Darth Vader stand-ins, hence the metal jaw, you know? And that he had a ridiculous laugh that like you know, I'm like, I think we could have left that on the cutting room floor, you know? What's interesting like about Knights of the Old Republic is not like Darth Malak the villain, it's Darth Malak used to be your friend, and then you guys turned to the dark side together, and then he wanted to be top dog. I find that to be more interesting than Malak being evil.
Yeah, I think the most intriguing part of his his role is that almost completes but he basically does where one of the last things that a Sith can do to become a Sith Lord is they need to kill their master, and he kind of does, but he doesn't.
He should have if he were really a Sith, he would have taken him in one-on-one combat.
Yeah, I mean, Sith have always just been very backstabbing, ruthless.
Crafty.
Yeah, and so I think a one-on-one battle. I would say Count Dooku doing that to Emperor Palpatine had he had the chance to do it, but we know with Palpatine and Plagueis that didn't happen, and there's a couple of the Sith that
Yeah, Palpatine just got Plagueis drunk.
yeah.
He cheated too.
Right. I mean, but I think that's a lot of the Sith story though is they find the opportune moment where their master is vulnerable and they
Yeah.
just slit their throat. You know, that's just kind of
Have some honor.
yeah. And I think that Count Dooku probably would have been the only one that would have had the level of honor to challenge his master to become the ultimate Sith Lord had he had the opportunity, but he
Yeah.
was cut short of that opportunity.
Yeah, so Malak's an okay villain, but I would say definitely in Knights of the Old Republic too. I find the villains in that one to be much more interesting and meatier.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out later.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to like get into too many spoilers, but Darth Treya is probably the best written character in all of Star Wars, or at least in the top 3, I would say.
So, but I think those are some good comparisons with the two games and just kind of where they're a little bit similar and where they differ a little bit. All right. Before we move on to our next topic, this is your warning that up next we'll be discussing The Mandalorian. If you wish to skip the segment, you can join us at 44 minutes and 52 seconds, where we will welcome you back and close out the episode, as we may be crashing. The question of whether I can fly this thing is irrelevant, so strap yourselves in as we make the jump.
So, episode 5 of The Mandalorian was titled The Gunslinger. It was written and directed by Dave Filoni. This episode featured a cold open where it didn't tell you how you got to where the episode was beginning. You just kind of had to like figure it out while it was happening. The Mandalorian was in a scuffle in space with another bounty hunter, and the other bounty hunter says, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold. And the Mandalorian gets kind of put out because he's like, that's my line, and he blasts the bounty hunter out of the sky. But the ship is worse for wear and it needs help. So they decide to go to a desert world, but not just any desert world. They go to Tatooine.
Finally, we
And I
go back
liked,
to some classic Star Wars world.
yeah, I like that.
It was
It's the
really
first time since Return of the Jedi
yeah,
that we've been back there.
it was really fun to see just a classic world.
And
It was still different, but it was very what we remember.
I think it's the best kind of fan service. I don't even know if I would call it fan service, honestly, because it just makes it feel like the universe is connected and anchored and all together rather than just saying, like, hey, we need a planet that's like Tatooine, but not Tatooine, so we're gonna call it Jakku. Or we need a planet like Endor, or the forest moon of Endor, but not the forest moon of Endor, and we're gonna call it Takonda, you know? I like that they're just like, nope, we want a Tatooine, so we're just gonna go to the actual Tatooine, you know? So props for them doing that.
And that's kind of what I wanted them to do before. It was like either show us something new, call it something different, or just take us back to a place that we already know. And
Yeah.
that wasn't done in the Skywalker extendeds, but it was done for the Mandalorian, and it was like such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. So anyways, they land in Hangar 35 in Anchorhead, and Peli Motto is the owner of that hangar, and it's guest star Amy Sedaris. And I've always kind of imagined, like, if I were in Star Wars, I'd be a Bastila Shan, or I'd be, a Princess Leia. But I think if I were actually to be in Star Wars, I don't even know if I would be, like, a Peli Motto, you know? She was a hilarious character, like, she has all of her pit droids. Amy Sedaris is, like, a comedic actress, so it makes sense to kind of make her character a humorous character, She knows what she's doing with the ship. So that was nice.
Yeah, I did like the character. Kind of this deep into the episode, and we're not seeing a lot of the same characters except for the Mandalorian and the Baby Yoda. And so some of these characters are starting to become a little bit forgettable to me. But I did enjoy kind of how, I guess, her influence throughout the story. I thought that it was kind of funny to see her nickel and dime the Mandalorian, using his words against him, like, oh, if I can't use my pit droids, then I have to charge you extra because of how much more work it is. And then she finds the little yodeling and is like, oh, because I have to babysit the little yodeling, I'm going to charge him extra. And so she just kind of like finds these little ways to make the Mandalorian's ticket go higher, which I thought was pretty amusing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make money even in a galaxy far, far away. So props for Peli for showing assertiveness, and going for it. It was kind of funny that the Mandalorian left Baby Yoda in a spaceship when it's really been established that Baby Yoda likes touching buttons. And if you basically know any human child, even if, like, I don't know, like, if Baby Yoda's supposed to be a toddler or like an infant or a baby or what, but kids like figure stuff out and open doors and like leave. So you can tell the Mandalorian hasn't had much experience with kids because he got out. So then the Mandalorian goes to the bar, that the cantina of Mos Eisley that Luke Skywalker went to with Ben Kenobi, and that's where they met Han Solo and Chewbacca. It's been 5 years in universe. So, and it kind of seems like Tatooine has kind of gone downhill since Jabba the Hutt has died. Kind of had an unfortunate run-in with, a princess. So that bar used to not serve droids because the owner also kind of had like an unfortunate experience with droids during the Clone Wars.
Yeah, that bar used
So
to
now,
be Droidsist, and then is now The bartender is a droid now.
But it kind of makes sense, because even though it's been 5 years in universe and a lot has changed, everyone from the 1977 movie is probably not around, or they look significantly older, so it makes sense to have droids running the town. And then the Mando, he kind of looks around the bar and he sees Toro Calican, who is played by Jake Cannavale. He's sitting in Han's spot. He even has his leg up on the table like Han. And Toro kind of looks like that guy that in high school or college he might have gone out with, except like for his personality. You're like, oh yeah, that's why we never worked out. He kind of has the Shakespeare one earring, and you can tell he's trying to affect the swagger and cockiness that Han Solo has, but he just has none of the charisma. Because Harrison Ford he was Han Solo. Harrison Ford could usually only really play himself, I would say, but he just was Han Solo. This guy is trying to be like a Han Solo type, but you can kind of tell he's kind of like a young guy who doesn't really know what he's doing. But he really wants the Mandalorian's help. He shows him a bounty for a woman called Fennec Shand, played by guest star Ming-Na Wen. So Toro Calican, he offers the Mandalorian a chance to take a bounty with him for someone named Fennec Shand, which is just one letter off of Shan, but Fennec Shand is played by guest star Ming-Na Wen, who was the voice of Princess Mulan. Well, I guess she technically wasn't a princess in the movie Mulan, but Disney made her a princess for their princess line. And she was also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so she's a storied guest star and has a whole lot of experience with working with Disney. What did you think of Toro?
I don't know. So one of the things that I picked up was I'm sure whoever handed him the puck, probably felt annoyed by him and handed him the hardest bounty to cash, or they didn't really see much potential and just wanted to get rid of him. It's kind of like the vibe I got from how he involved the Mandalorian. And I feel like the Mandalorian kind of had the same thoughts too, of like this kiddo was in way over his head, probably for any puck handed to him. Yeah, everything he had was new. He like, I don't know. It's like starting a hobby for the first time, and so you buy all this fresh gear and equipment, but you have no idea how to use it. And you show up day one, you're like, check out all this cool stuff. I'm a professional, but you don't even know how to turn it on. That's kind of like how I saw this guy.
Toro could have been patient and learned the skills and developed like a good friendship with the Mandalorian, but I think he kind of wanted to just be an instant success and kind of take the easier, even like if it makes sense for him to kind of take the easier way, but he just wanted to like get a whole lot of money then and get a whole lot of prestige rather than kind of working for it. That's how I saw it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I think, didn't he give the Mandalorian like he was going to give him the reward? But
yeah, he just wanted the experience.
Yeah, he wanted the title of cashing in the puck. He would have to pay the Mandalorian for the help, and it seemed like he was wealthy, like he came from a wealthy household, so he didn't really need the money, but he needed his name.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what he was after. And then when they go at the end of the episode, the assassin tells him that the Mandalorian's worth way more than she is, and to capture him instead. And so he's like, well, I can become even more famous, and I don't have to pay him if I capture him. So
yeah, but then they end up getting the speeder bikes, and it was fun to see speeder bikes again. Also, we haven't really seen those in live action since Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, swoop bikes are pretty situational. Like, you need a lot of space and a lot of open ground to cover for a swoop bike to be useful. Otherwise, a larger like artillery type tank would be much more useful, because swoops are just meant to go from point A to point B as fast as you can. They're not built for armor, they're not built for weapons.
Yeah. Before the Mando meets Toro at the speeder bikes, he goes back to the hangar and sees that Pelly is holding the kid. And can I just say it's going to be weird if the Baby Yoda ever gets a name to not call him Baby Yoda? But she's like, oh, I'll just watch the baby because he's adorable, because who wouldn't, you know? Like, I wouldn't even need to be paid to, like, watch Baby Yoda. I would, like, maybe pay for the experience to watch Baby Yoda. And then The
And he seemed to
Mandalorian.
enjoy it too. Like you could tell that she had no issues watching him, and she enjoyed watching him, and he enjoyed the company. So it
Yeah.
was like there's
Sometimes I worry about Baby Yoda. I'm like, he's living, like, with a bounty hunter and sees a whole lot of violence happen in front of him. Is he going to turn into a sociopath? But it seems like Baby Yoda gets a lot of love from, like, all the guest stars. So I'm like, oh, I think he's going to turn out
yeah.
okay, you know?
And he's
So,
50, and so I'd be more concerned about what's been going on since before the Mandalorian took him over and what that's been doing to him. Because
yeah,
I think a lot of things that's going on with the Mandalorian he's already seen, if anything, just
it's
with the
definitely
company that he
something
was
to think
rescued
about.
from. We don't even know if he was rescued from a situation, more so taken from that situation. So we don't even know if the Mandalorian initially picked him up from a good or bad setting.
And then Toro and the Mando head off into the desert. They also run into some sand people, and the Mandalorian has to communicate with them in, like, their kind of sign language, which I think makes sense. It kind of reminded me of Knights of the Old Republic when you'd have to get, like, HK-47 to interpret for you, but instead of, like, using sign language, like, he just, like, would do, like, the sand people, like, to them. So, but I don't think you want Pedro Pascal to try that, you know? Not that he can't do it, but, like, sign language is, like, you know, more pleasing to the ear.
It was more in character. I think it would have just been weird if he all of a sudden knew how to speak Tusken Raider.
Yeah. So it makes sense. So Toro lost his binoculars, but, you know, sometimes you have to make a sacrifice for the greater good, you know.
Yeah,
But then,
his brand new binoculars. He made a big point in pointing that out.
yep, they're as brand new as he is at this bounty hunting gig. So then Fennec has the high ground. I'm glad that the high ground was referenced in this episode because it's, you know, a popular meme. So they have to wait until night.
You notice that she still doesn't win though because Obi-Wan is the king of the high ground.
Yeah, who knows? Like, the ghost of Obi-Wan could be influencing this shot. And the Mandalorian's Beskar saves him. Then Toro sneaks up behind Fennec and saves the Mandalorian. Then the Mandalorian shows up and Fennec is put into cuffs, and they're gonna head back on the one last speeder bike. The Mandalorian was gonna go have Toro get the dewback, but, like, Toro didn't really trust the Mandalorian. So then the Mandalorian heads off, and while that's happening, Fennec tries to, like, convince Toro to see it her way. I'm glad she didn't try to seduce him or anything. It's just something that's played out, you know, so much that I'm just like, I'm glad she, like, just appealed to, like, his desire for money rather than anything else, you know. I totally thought, like, Toro was gonna free Fennec. I was like, oh, Toro, don't go for it. Come on. But then, like, he whips out, like, reflexes faster than, like, the Han Greedo McClunky shootout, and he, like, I want to say he kills her, but I'm not sure actually.
She's dead. I think isn't the last scene the Mandalorian comes back and sees that she's dead.
That's what I'm not sure about. Like, the end, it made it seem like it would have been out of order, the Mandalorian and the child, like, leave for another world. And, like, when I was first watching it, you know, like, I was like, was it the Mandalorian, like, looking over her body? Because they both have a cape. But I was like, why would they not show his face? I was like, oh, it's Boba Fett. And I'm like, why would it be Boba Fett. So I'm kind of wondering if that's Giancarlo Esposito's character, but I kind of wonder like why they're not showing his face, why they're holding off on that.
No, I
So
could have sworn that he came back with the dewback, saw that she was gone and he was missing, so he rode back to Mos Eisley and took the kid and left.
yeah, but I mean, I was talking about the very last shot of the episode.
Oh, I
Because
must
the
have skipped.
Mandalorian sees her dead on the ground. Toro's nowhere there. So he goes back to the hangar where his ship is, and Toro is holding the baby hostage. The Mandalorian pretends like he's holding his hands behind his head, but he has the flash grenade. And then they get out, and he kills Toro. Toro is dead. And the kid was kind of thrown in the ensuing fight, but he's okay, you know. It was kind of funny to see him come out of the rubble, you know. And then the Mandalorian leaves with Baby Yoda, and they go off. And then the final shot has a mysterious person in a cape approaching Fennec's body. We don't see who it is or what happens next, but I'm like, she's dead. I don't think she could be alive, but maybe anything can happen.
I bet it's that one guy from
Giancarlo Esposito. That's who I'm guessing it is.
yeah,
So,
the original like puck dealer for the Mandalorian.
yeah. So, I found it to be a more enjoyable episode than episode 4. I liked it. I think when Dave Filoni is given the opportunity to write and direct, it's like a solid, you know, Star Wars fan palooza. So I do want to see, like, I don't want to have the Mandalorian and the child be on the run the whole season. I would like them to confront some of the people, but I think in the next few episodes we're going to see more of Giancarlo Esposito's character, and I think we'll definitely like get some resolution for the finale.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest feedback is I would like to see more characters linger. Like every episode we're meeting new people all the time and then they're gone the next episode. And it would be nice to have more callbacks to characters we've already met progress with the story. And so we most likely see that with whoever's tracking the Mandalorian. But even that one girl from the last episode, it would have been nice to maybe see her tag along for one more episode, or I don't know, one of the like the Mandalorian group if they're around another episode, or
I think we'll see them again.
yeah,
and I definitely think we'll see Cara Dune again.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so far the trend has been that we don't really see any of them. So I would like to, but we'll see.
Trends exist to be broken, in my opinion, especially in like season finales, I would say. Because you kind of begin a show, and then when you end it, a lot of actors and like a lot of the threads are kind of tied up. So I think we'll see some of the characters again. That concludes our episode 5, The Gunslinger.
We want to welcome back those that have skipped along from the Mandalorian discussion. And we'll go ahead and close out our episode today.
This has been Cassia.
And this has been Coden.
You can find us at ebonhawkpodcast@gmail.com, and you can email us your comments and questions.
And you can find me from time to time on twitch.tv/ConanBond from streaming various Star Wars games, kind of messing around with Star Wars Fallen Order. So if you can catch my tweet, you can catch me there.
And then we are also on Instagram at ebonhawkpodcast. And our intro and outro themes were composed by Alistair Schurman. He can be found at alistairsounds.wixsite.com/alistairsounds. And our transition music was composed by Christian Walker, and he can be found at christianwalkermusic.com. This has been episode 7 of the Ebon Hawk. Take care of yourselves, meatbags, and may the force be with you. We will be back next week. Bye for now.